do you get all of your points in the offseason? So as an example, you advance the week, your guy goes up 7, and then you have 7 points to assign to skill groups. Is that what's happens? Or is it one of those things where it automatically assigns those skill groups out there? How I read how it happens here is this. What is up, everybody? It is Jake back with the MF Film Room. Thank you so much for being here. If you want to be up to date on all things EA college football, hit that red subscribe button. Right now, I'm going to be giving away 2 deluxe copies of the game to 2 of my subscribers. We're going to be doing that drawing on July 14th, no longer at midnight. I'm going to have it earlier in the day. Remember, if you've already got the game pre-ordered, I'll give you $100 cash. So hit that red subscribe button, hit the like button as well, and follow me on Twitter/X. If you like college football content, go subscribe to my other channel, Master Football with Jake Posey. Link is in the description. But enough about all that EA college football content. Let's go. Now, for those of you who don't know, I am filming this a day early on America's birthday. And if you want me to apologize for America-ing more than anybody, freedom, let freedom ring in the background. You actually probably can hear some of the fireworks going off because, again, I have to work tomorrow morning. I'm filming this at night. The fireworks are going off. You all know what it is. So with that, I wanted to discuss something because I was checking through the Dynasty Deep Dive earlier this week, and there was something that I had some questions on that I'd like to answer. I want to go into that really quickly because the thing that is really interesting with what they had, and actually a lot of my subscribers went ahead and messaged me about this on my video earlier this week, is the player progression. Now, the cool thing about player progression in college football, the thing about college football is that the RPG elements of the game, I mentioned this in my video earlier this week, RPG elements, the cool thing about this is because of the turnover within the team, the team is much more important to you than as opposed to just having a couple really good players. So your university, the logo, the name on the front of the jersey is more important. Those players come in and come out. Sometimes it's junior college, you only count them for a couple of years. Now you're going to have transfers. You're also going to have players who you brought up from a lowly freshman, a 2-star, but you brought them all the way up to like a Heisman winner, something like that. Those are the stories that we like to get into. With that, the player progression is very important because you don't have these players for very long. You don't have, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 years to progress somebody up and get them up to that point. In Madden, if they were to progress for that long, they would eventually go down. We're going to get into that in a second here. What I want to do, though, is go through what they had on that Dynasty Deep Dive in regards to the player progression, and then go through some of my notes because they weren't explicit in what it was going to be, but I have some ideas. I'm going to get into that right now. All right, over here on the player progression, it's really cool that they brought this up. They mentioned the fact that it's the most impactful time period when it comes to player development in college football. While players can improve throughout the season, the bulk of their progression and development happens during the spring and summer. Again, that is one thing that I made sure I mentioned in a couple of my desired videos. A lot of people are like, oh yeah, well over in Madden, you do it on a week-to-week basis, whereas in college football, it's the off-season. People bulk up, people do this, people do that. That's where the majority of that development happens. It also talked about the ability to improve your attributes and your physical abilities, whereas mental abilities cannot be upgraded, allowing for greater differentiation between players. And they also mentioned a couple of the dev traits too. I do think that it's fair because in Madden, there's a lot of things that say, oh yeah, well, I want to be able to improve this or not. Whereas this game in college football, you can tell certain players are just going to be stars. Certain players might have to develop a little bit slower, and certain players are probably just going to be role players. It's more evident in college than it is in pros. They also mentioned skill groups. Now, the skill groups, we're going to talk about that too because it's an interesting look in terms of how it is different from archetypes in Madden. So we know that there's going to be archetypes in this game. As a matter of fact, if we scroll up here, you can see that they're attached to almost every recruit. So right here on this recruiting section, it even goes through Kevin Bavaro. He's a quarterback. He is an improviser. That is his tendency. Now, the way that that's going to work in this game is going to be a little bit different than how it works in Madden, but there's going to be a lot of crossover. Now, with those skill groups, they mentioned here also the fact that on this game, they have these things, these points and how they're going to be allocated. I want to discuss that because I think it's really interesting what they've done, given some autonomy to the player, and they've kind of removed some as well. It's really interesting on what they've done. So what I want to do is go through what NCAA Football 2014 has done, what Madden has done, what I think is going on here, and then eventually what I think is going to happen, because it's not as customizable as I would like. However, there is that level of customization as this game has been highlighting throughout. All right, when we're talking about NCAA Football 2014, there's two different versions, and again, we know this in the game. There's the in-season progression and the off-season progression. So in-season progression, there's going to be a few, awareness points might go to a player here and there. This guy had a good week, give him an awareness point, just typically one per week. It's not going to be like 2, 3, 4, 5, one per week. Some guys might even be good enough to have go up each and every week for a certain amount of time, but generally one awareness point. On occasion, you would see a wide receiver would get a +1 catch. So they give a +1 to awareness, +1 to a catch. They could progress a little bit faster in some ways. I felt like, in my opinion, centers progress the fastest on this game because you could literally go up 10 weeks in a row. So you go up 10 awareness would be a pretty big impact. However, in the off season, though, players would generally go up after training. You would set their position changes, which this game has as well. Set your position changes, and then you would go through your progression. In Madden, you can switch your players left and right, up and down all the time. You can switch their position every single week to make it easier to go from like a 3-4 DN to a 4-3 defensive tackle, a 3-4 outside linebacker to a 4-3 defensive end. They're pretty similar here. Generally, they've gone with interior defensive lineman and edge rusher. That's what the new term that they're using is. But you see here they have players can go up 4 to 7 points overall. You do your progression, or you do your position changes, then you go through your offseason training. Generally, it would be evenly distributed points for that position. So on that game, they had tendencies. You were a balanced running back, you were an elusive running back, you were a power running back. But generally, the points, it wasn't like if you were an elusive back, it would go to elusive things, or power, it would go to a power things. It was just a general even distribution of points across the board. Player archetype was informational and had no impact. However, it did have an impact on your recruiting because you could use automated recruiting to find certain archetypes. I want to automatically be looking for run-stopping right outside linebackers. I want to automatically be looking for, scrambling quarterbacks. You could set that in the recruiting. Other than that, it didn't really have an impact on the game. So NCAA Football 2014, the majority of the progression was done in the offseason. In Madden, in the current last couple of Maddens, what they do is they do it in season. So you get these from practice drills with XP for accumulating archetype points. It would generally get boosts if players' archetype fits the scheme that you have. So archetypes actually had a little bit of a factor there, although you could switch your archetype anytime that you wanted to and then fit players here and there on that. They would get a little boost on that for their weekly progression. In the offseason, generally young players would go up in certain ratings, while multi-year veterans would see decreases in abilities. Obviously, if you're 33 and you're going to be 34 years old and you're a corner, you're going to lose a step. That's kind of just what happens. Now, some of the notes I had here for progression in EA College Football 25. Quote, in Dynasty, players will automatically progress their attributes and physical abilities. Another quote here is players will progress during the season based on their on-field performance, but the bulk of their progression will happen in the off-season. So what that means to me is that they're automatically going to progress their attributes and physical abilities, and its majority of that is going to happen in that off-season. Now, talking about those dev traits, it's going to be interesting here because Madden, what you could do is you actually could have like, oh, you got your dev trait game. You got to get a certain amount of stats here, a certain amount of stats there. With this, though, it sounds like you have a dev trait, but you have no indication you have the ability to improve them like Madden. If you're normal dev trait, you're normal. If you're elite, and that's kind of it. It also says here that users can't apply points into skill groups with caps on how many times you can apply those points. So within there, you'll be able to see that actually within those bars, you have different groups of those abilities and skill groups that you can have. However, you can't just give 10 points, 10 points, 10 points to each of them. Some of them have caps. Check this out right here. So checking over here on Quinshawn Judkins, you'll be able to see that he's got these different groups here, these skill groups, the elusiveness skill group, the hands skill group, the IQ skill group, the route running, the power, the quickness. You see, though, that within here, there's generally 10 points. He has a certain amount allocated within here, but you see the fact that this is marked off, this is marked off, and this is marked off on the route running. So you could go to 67, 68, 69, 70, 71, 72, 73. So he's going to cap out at a 73 route running as a skill group. So you see here that within the power, it impacts toughness, injury, strength, jumping, and stiff arm and trucking. Whereas route running, we don't know that yet, but you will have the ability to assign them out. Now, at first, I was a little bit weirded out because I was like, okay, so you automatically get the points, but you have these skill groups that you can assign them to. How does that work? Do you get all of your points in the offseason? So as an example, you advance the week, your guy goes up 7, and then you have 7 points to assign to skill groups. Is that what happens? Or is it one of those things where it automatically assigns those skill groups out there? How I read how it happens here is this. It looks like off-season progression will occur like in NCAA Football 2014, meaning Points will be assigned to a player across a general spread for the position and not the archetype. So unfortunately, one thing that I wish you could do is you could say, hey, I want you to specifically assign points here, assign points there. You're not able to do that with the off-season recruiting. However, throughout the year, it looks like you can. It goes on here, it says, during the season, when a player earns enough XP, they will gain a skill group point similar to Madden Weekly progression points that they can apply to a specific area. This is to make sure that not everybody just assigns, okay, strong arm, strong arm, strong arm, strong arm, strong arm for their quarterback to get that throw power up. It takes a lot longer than you would think. Again, all you Madden players know that. But again, I think that's what it is here. Now, for future games, I've gone back and forth on this because I'll say this. I don't mind that. Again, I think it takes some of the ability out of you. However, there's certain things you can do where you can be, there's certain coaching abilities that can improve your ability to progress. There's, your ability to just play with the player and you can specifically push them in a general direction. I want it to be like this. I also obviously want the off-season progression to occur like NCAA Football 2014. The majority of the points are happen there. They accumulate there. However, what I want, though, is as opposed to it just generally assigning you points. So meaning in the game, what would happen is you're going to go up 7. Now, what I want to have happen is just like Madden, where if you get 7 points, now you can apply 7 points to receiving back, or 3 points to power back, 3 points to elusive back, whatever it is. You can do it on your own. It gives you more autonomy over the situation. So what I wanted to have happen is skill group points are accumulated from off-season training, and a coach gets to assign them, or you can assign skill groups you want a position group or a specific player to concentrate on. That one I'm actually a little bit more of a fan of because it adds more randomness to it. And you can say, hey, in the offseason, I want you to concentrate on this. That's a little bit more realistic to college football where, you'll see a coach be like, hey, in the offseason, I need you to get it bigger. Hey, in the offseason, I need you to get it lighter. Hey, in the offseason, I need you to get it faster, more agile, more flexible. Whatever it is, they do that. Do they have the ability to be like, all right, I want you to give you 8 points into power? I mean, that's a little subjective, but you are going to say, I want you to concentrate on certain things. I wish that was in this game. Also, we see here that impact, star, and elite dev traits, what I want to have happen is they should be evenly distributed, not just among the top players. So as an example, you could be a normal dev trait 5-star who's 77 overall. That's still a pretty good player, and most of you would want that. I want it to be, there might be a star dev trait with a player who's 48 overall. What I mean by that is that there's those players out there, your Ziggy Ansahs at BYU, your players out there who are like, they're just freak athletes, but they're not good at the position. That happens a lot more in college football. They should be rare players, but if you get them and you keep them for a couple years and you work on them and you train on them, they could eventually develop into top level type players. I wish that was in this game, but those are just some of the things that I am interested in for future games. Also, before we get ahead of ourselves, do you think my current assessment of what progression looks like is correct? What do you want to see in future games? What do you hope to still see in this game that you haven't seen yet? You guys get in the comments and let me know. So progression in the game, it looks pretty cool. Now, there's a couple things here where points are randomly assigned in the off season, but also you have skill group points that you can assign there. It's kind of like you have some ability to assign those points, but some of it's taken away from you. Again, which do you prefer? I personally like the choice and the autonomy of being able to do it myself, but I also kind of like the randomness of somebody just getting generally better overall. What do you guys think about the progression in EA College Football 25? All right, guys, that's it. Thank you so much for being here. Please like, share, comment, subscribe, do all that stuff. Remember, 2 free deluxe copies of the game are going out to 2 of my subscribers. That's not 2 times 2. That's 1 to each of them, just to make sure we're clear. If you already got the game, you get $100 cash. Hit that red subscribe button. Also hit the like button as well. And follow me on Twitter/X. That is it for me, guys. I will see you guys later. Happy birthday to America. And I am out.